When I was a kid, I was always afraid of dentists because when I was growing up in Russia, these morons never used any painkillers, believe it or not. The retort from a dentist when you were crying was, wait, you came to a dentist and you don't expect pain? I remember I was about 13 or 14 years old, and they were doing a root canal with no painkillers. And I'm shouting my head off, and this nurse who was helping the doctor just looks at me like, why are you shouting like this? I said, lady, let's put you in the chair and remove nerves, live nerves with no painkillers. And so, yeah, I always hated dentists, but turns out these guys and gals can be more useful than you think. So I have a little story for you tonight. So when I came to Canada in '97, and I always had trouble with teeth because I loved sweets, candies and chocolate, stuff like that. I could eat glazed cornflakes by the pound, like I remember my late dad looking at me because I had a pack of glazed cornflakes, and I would just eat them. I would put them in a bowl, and I would just eat them with a spoon. Like no milk, no water, no juice, nothing. And he looks at me. He says, "Sergey, how can you eat them like this?" I know they're good. So they were packs probably, I don't know, like this big, but they were selling them everywhere. Of course, there was like a ton of sugar in that. But kids, like they love sweets, right? But that's what I grew up with, and I always had trouble, maybe because also some people say, your actual zodiac sign, if you believe in that. But, I'm a Capricorn because I was born in January. And if you look up Capricorns, it says that they don't have enough calcium and they should avoid coffee and they should take good care of their teeth. And so shortly after I arrived in Canada and I settled down in the western suburb of Toronto, which was Etobicoke, or Etobicoke. And one day I was researching, dentists in the area, and I found this guy with a, kind of like Russian or Ukrainian name. I don't even remember his name, but he was a super nice guy. So it turns out he came from Ukraine some 5 years prior to that, and he was a dentist in Ukraine. So here in Canada, he had to take a bunch of exams, to get to the level where they would allow him to open his own clinic. And so he opened his own clinic, and you can imagine a dentist with his own clinic, and he has people working for him. I mean, man. So he was, like a future, like basically a millionaire in the making. And so, super nice guy. Spoke, well, we talked in Russian, so, because I think he was from Western Canada. And he said he married Ukrainian Canadian. So he married a lady whose parents came to Canada a long time ago, and so she was born here, but she still spoke Ukrainian and Russian, so they got married, and I think she was wealthy, and she kind of like helped him to get on his feet, but imagine a guy owns a clinic, like holy moly. And I'm like just fresh out of Russia. All I had was 20,000 US or 30,000 Canadian back in the day that I came with. And so for some reason, once I went for this appointment and we're talking about investments, stocks. Oh yeah, because, when I came in, so I had these 30 grand and I went to a bank to open an account, and the guy said, so you want all 30,000 in the checking account, or maybe we could put them somewhere where you can make some money? And I said, what do you guys have in mind? And he said, well, we have our bank, mutual fund. We can try that. And I never heard of that idea before, but I said, okay, let's go ahead. Let's put, 25 grand. Like put 5 in the checking and put 25 in that crazy mutual fund run by the bank. And so they did that, and actually after 3 months I needed the money, so I came back and I got lucky back in 1987, and I made like 2 grand. So instead of 25,000, they gave me 27,000, because I still remember until that time, when I was in Russia, I was always using Windows and DOS computer system. So I always wanted to have a Mac, because I love writing, creating something. So, and I heard that Macs are much better for creative people. So I always wanted to have a Mac. And so basically with this mutual fund thing, I got a free computer. I went to a store, I bought my first Mac. So this was 1997. But back to the story with the dentist, and why you might want to listen carefully to what your dentist has to say. No, but seriously, now it's 2025, right? And I've been hearing some stories, on the radio, MSNBC and CNN, of course. No Fox News for this guy. And they're saying that people are lining up around the world to buy gold, and that gold prices are through the roof, And so, which, like, I was kind of like, unpleasantly surprised, because back then, so I still had some money in the bank account, right? And so I'm talking to this guy. Yeah, I think his name was Myron. Like a typical Ukrainian name, M-Y-R-O-N, Myron. And so we were talking, so he's drilling my teeth, and to give me a respite between, we're talking about stocks for some reason, because, I think at that time I was trying to decide whether I want to do a real estate, or whether, real estate course, or take a stock investment course, because I could have become a stock, like I found how to do it. You just take like a 3 months course, and then you get your certificate, and you can, work at a stock company, trading stocks. And so I was always interested in stocks, because, it's I have a curious mind, so this involves research. You learn new things, I think I would be a great stockbroker, or just an investor for myself. And so we were talking stocks one day, and this Myron guy, a rich, millionaire in the making, dentist who owns a clinic, and he says, I don't do stocks. And I said, what do you mean? He says, I buy gold. And I'm like, what? Why would you buy gold? He says, gold is always getting up in price, so trust me. Stocks are too volatile. Gold is where it's at. So now we are in 2025, and of course we have all kind of data on the internet, right? And all I did was I typed into Google search window, price of gold in 1997 in Canada. And it says here that the average price of gold in Canada in 1997 was $330 US per ounce. So just remember that number for a second, 330 US per ounce. And then I did another search in another window, price of gold today in Canada. And AI overview says, as of late October 2025, the spot price of gold in Canada is approximately $4,371.89 per ounce. Wait, that's Canadian. 4371. Okay. Yeah, price of gold today in Canada in USD. The price of gold in Canadian dollars can be converted to USD, but the specific exchange rate will determine the exact price. As of provided data, the spot price of gold is approximately 200 per 10 grams or 2,041 per ounce. Yeah, so basically 2,041, and in 97 it was 330. So 2,041 divided by 330. So that's 6.18. 6.18. That's how many times the price increased. And actually, yeah, on the news today they were saying that gold beat stocks over time. So basically 6.18. So let's say if I listen to my dentist between the drilling, periods, and I invested $10,000 into 10,000 US into gold. So that was 97. So now 28 years later, I would have 6.18. So I would have 61,800 bucks. I think it's not bad, If you can afford to set aside like 10 grand, that's pretty cool. So yeah, so next time, the whole point of this video is that, dentists are very smart people. And they always invest into things because they have so much money, And so next time you sit in a chair and you listen to your dentist blabber away, just throw in, a question, like what would you recommend in terms of investment? Because you might find out something that can change your life for the better.